Hey everyone, and welcome to the Wellable Podcast, a series focused on building better cultures and more productive workforces. Whether you're an employee wellness and engagement expert or just a novice, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Nick Patel, and Wellable is your one-stop shop to stay informed and up-to-date on trends and data in the employee wellness and engagement industry. Before we get started, be sure to connect with us and join the conversation on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @GetWellable. So let me know what you think about the show and the topics you want to hear in future episodes. We have a great episode today. This is a particularly special episode for two reasons. First, many of you are probably thinking, I love Wellable's written content, their blogs, and their ebooks, but this is the first time I've ever listened to a Wellable podcast. Well, you're not alone. This is our first Wellable podcast, and so everyone's listening for the first time. Secondly, there's not a better way to kick off a series than who we have as our guest today. With me here today is Tom Ciccotti, the co-founder and executive vice president at Shortlister. Tom, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Nick. I've followed Wellable and its content for quite a while. I think day one when you guys started back in 2013. So certainly honored to be invited to help kick off the inaugural podcast here.
The pleasures are all on our side. So I know Tom very well. As he mentioned, he's an avid reader of our content. We've connected numerous times. We're very grateful that he is on our show today. So what I'd like to do first is, Tom, just spend a few moments, give everyone your background and who you are so they can be familiar.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the wellness industry now for about 10 years, across a wide array of different roles from account management to sales and so forth. And currently I'm the co-founder and EVP of Shortlister, which is technology and consultative expertise to help both employers and employee benefit consultants identify the best human capital vendors. So by human capital, a pretty wide range of expertise from traditional wellness vendors to EAP, disease management, financial wellness, all the way to Ben admin solutions.
Very impressive. Can you quickly give us a description on what Shortlister, the platform is itself, and what it does for its customers?
Yeah, so just, kind of went through some of the categories. We have over 350 different vendors that enroll in the platform and really articulate who they are and what they do. What are their core competencies, geographically where they can provide services, what are the minimum group size they work with. We kind of jokingly refer to it, Nick, like eHarmony or Match.com means finding a wellness vendor. They're identifying who they are, drawing a line in the sand as their capabilities and so forth. And then our employer and consultant partners come into that same platform. It's a very similar set of questions, but they're articulating, here are my program goals. Here is my budget. Here's a little bit about my demographic profile. Here are the capabilities or services that I'm looking for. And the system will then identify, what vendors in the space are experienced and have the capability that you're looking for, giving them then a medium to do some discovery, review options before inviting a subset of vendors, call them finalists, to an RFP phase, where they can then share more specific detail. The vendors can pose questions, indicate if they intend to bid, before ultimately putting together a customized response to that situation at hand. So over the past 4 years, we've helped a few thousand employers go through that selection process, representing over 4 million employee lives.
That's a very impressive reach. So let's dive right into it. So Tom and Shortlister recently released their annual report called the Well-being Industry Prospectus 2017, where they presented lots of interesting information on where the wellness industry is headed. Reviewing the report is our topic for today. Before we dive into the findings in the report, I was really impressed by the respondents of your survey. Tom, can you tell us a little bit about who you went out to survey, why you did that, and kind of a little bit of background so our listeners today can understand who are they getting this expertise advice from?
Yeah, absolutely. So our respondents to this survey were 114 of the nation's top wellness subject matter experts within the largest employee benefit consultants in the country. So these are the folks that are kind of first and foremost tasked with helping an employer understand the culture, the environment, the foundational elements of implementing a wellness solution and having those aspects in place, and then also helping them navigate the wellness vendor marketplace when a third-party vendor is appropriate. So these folks, we went and asked these questions of, based on your visibility to how purchasers, employers in the space are selecting products and services and vendors, what do you see to be emerging areas of interest? What is happening more or less than in previous years to start to capture these trends for both employers, the vendor community, and our consultant partners to understand, maybe outside of their individual perspective and what they may be experiencing, what is the larger market seeing? Is it similar to, is it different from what I may be experiencing?
Just for everyone's reference, this is the second annual report on the topic. So Tom, from previous versions and just by virtue of being a subject matter expert himself, has the benefit of reference points from last year's results. So I want to talk a little bit about expectations and surprises. So Tom, let's start with expectations. What did you expect to see in the report that actually came true?
Yeah, so one of the big expected areas, and it's a theme that I think many are seeing in the space, is terms of well-being versus wellness. Ultimately, it's the shift beyond programming that's more solely focused on the physical wellness aspects of a walking program, just a screening and so forth. And we had 90% of respondents basically say that our clients have a strong interest to and are shifting to a approach of total well-being over just a more focused approach to things like just physical wellness. And that's a 17% increase from last year's responses. So definitely a growing trend to start to incorporate more elements, mindfulness and resilience programming, financial well-being, and so forth to complement what they may have in place. It's oftentimes, at least initially, more physically focused.
So on the other end of the spectrum, what was the biggest surprise you saw in the report? Was there anything that you just didn't expect coming?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have this really interesting visual on one of the pages of the report that conveyed a pretty strong disparity between what respondents to other clients indicate as a must-have, think of it more like a table stakes element, versus areas that were growing in demand. So for example, things like biometric screenings were indicated as a must-have by 51% of respondents, but only 2% of them indicated that biometrics were growing in demand. Versus, and again, that disparity, to something like financial wellness, where 68% of respondents indicated, yeah, this is definitely growing in demand, higher interest, but only 5% indicated this is a must-have as it relates to actually selecting a vendor partner and implementing that solution. So kind of the disparity between what capability is the foundational blocking and tackling type elements that employers would need to have when selecting a partner versus areas that are high interest and are emerging, but folks aren't necessarily transacting on, and there's a number of different reasons behind that.
Interesting. I was always kind of found the topic of the must-haves and growing demand quite fascinating, and you have a great chart in the report, so I encourage everyone to actually download the full report and to take a look at it. But it's a really great visual to understand the disparity between the must-haves and the growing demand. One of the things I found most interesting is that the must-haves, like, as you mentioned, biometric screenings and HRAs, seem to be the most controversial, right? We blog a lot about this. We wrote an ebook about the topic, about the downsides of these kind of services. And I don't think we're alone. So, going to that point, biometric screenings have received a fair bit of criticism. And I feel like just from our perspective, that criticism is growing. What are your thoughts on this? Are employers on the right side of history as treating these type of services as must-have?
Yeah, really good question. So, I think for screenings in particular, a lot of the criticisms around screenings have quite honestly more been around frequency and not following U.S. Preventive Services Task Force guidelines. So screening for screening's sake and these wide panels that aren't appropriate for age, gender, and all of these other factors, absolutely criticism is, appropriate for that. That said, a initiative that allows a member to go to their primary care physician and integrate some of that data, again, when appropriate, based on U.S. Preventive Services Task Force guidelines, may have the benefit of, well, did that motivate a member to actually establish that in-network PCP that they may not have had, in the first place? The other part about kind of screenings is I think there's criticism around design, particularly incentive design that's tied to that, and maybe less so the screening itself. So I've kind of seen that lumped in there, and I like to make that distinction. On the HRA side, I think there's a lot of progress that's happening there. Thinking of those two as kind of the key must-have blocking and tackling type elements that were referenced by respondents. On the HRA side, those old 30-minute surveys asking about, do you wear your seatbelt, number of alcoholic drinks, all of these different things that are just so generic in nature, and particularly programs that tie incentives to that type of self-reported information, you're inviting, misrepresenting and folks not being truthful in their responses. I think if you look at some of the more progressive, if you will, health assessments or questionnaires, there are solutions that are delivered via mobile to the member. It's a handful of questions that help them be more mindful in their day. Take a little break from work, reflect on your purpose, both personally or professionally. Or products like, health literacy type solutions that, I guess for lack of a better term, may be lumped into that HRA category, but help individuals be more informed consumers of healthcare. A lot of those changes are taking place.
Great. So let's switch gears a little bit. Part of your report talked about carrier solutions versus third-party solutions. You had some interesting statistics about the demand for carrier solutions, which are solutions that the employer's health plan or their third-party administrator offers. It looks like more and more employers are looking to third-party vendors to meet their employee wellness needs. Why do you think that's the case?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, it ultimately boils down to core competency. When you think of what these carriers or health plans are doing, fundamentally their focus is administration of benefits, paying claims, and so forth, whereas these third-party wellness vendors, that is what they do day in and day out. And, we have data in the recent report there to support that. In the mid-market, which we kind of classified as groups 5,000 lives or below, 40% of respondents said, my clients are opting for carrier programs less than they were the year prior. In what we deem large market groups of 5,000 lives or more, that number was even more substantial. It was 62% of groups are opting for carrier-based programs less than they were in the previous year.
So do you think as health plans realize that employers aren't looking to them as they traditionally have done in the past, do you think they'll upgrade their solutions? Do you think they will upgrade with proprietary solutions, or do you think they'll just white label a third-party vendor's technology?
So a little bit of all of that is going on. They have this kind of fundamental decision make of, do I build out of my own? That's unique proprietary. Do I acquire or pick up some of these third-party partners and make them my own via an acquisition? Or do I private or white label an existing provider in the market, but then have that be my solution? There are some carriers in the space that are absolutely doing a better job of deploying customized solutions that they've built in-house to the market. Some that actually, even if you're not enrolled on their health plan, is available. Others are only offering that to their members. I think one of the things that's interesting from the employer perspective is so often they may be engaging with a third-party wellness solution that's been private or white labeled to their carrier, but is far more rigid and less customizable than they may be able to get from that third-party vendor directly in the open market. And when you think about kind of the why of that, these carrier-based solutions need to deploy as consistent and scalable product or structure to their members so that the sales process to an employer firm, even the education of their personnel that go out and talk to member employers and then go through the implementation process, so that can be done in a scalable way. They have to fundamentally limit how customizable that can be. There are benefits to the employer and certain things are embedded or lower cost when it's going via the carrier solution, but you typically will lose the customization and really being able to make that your own that you get from third-party providers. Another really interesting trend we're seeing on the carrier side is this growth of these wellness funds to go out. Carriers are giving this to members to purchase wellness services as an added benefit and kind of an added piece in the process as to why you may be working with them as a carrier, but still give you freedom to elect the wellness vendor of your choosing.
Great. So I think my next question relates to the dynamic we're talking about between carrier solutions and third-party solutions. One of the findings in your report was a clear desire from employers for a mobile solution. What does this mean exactly?
Yeah, so mobile was an area where 25% of respondents said mobile is important to our clients, and we think that the integration of more thoughtful mobile solutions will improve the effectiveness of these well-being programs. So, I think one of the interesting distinctions to make on the mobile side is that term's thrown around a lot. What is a mobile-first vendor or a vendor with mobile capabilities that are native apps? Think my member has to go download that on the Google Play, the Android store, or the Apple App Store with the iOS, and actually take step one, download that piece to have access to all of this functionality versus a solution that is more dynamic or optimized to mobile, meaning that it's typically a web-based solution, but based on how the member is accessing that platform, their laptop, their iPad or tablet, or their mobile device, the user experience, the visual display is customized or optimized and dynamic to that screen size, and the navigation bars and different things change in real time to make for a better user experience. And there are benefits to both. In kind of that more optimized scenario where a member can access the web platform for any device they're on, there is no fundamental first step of download. So that potential friction or barrier for someone to first go to the App Store to get access to that resource is eliminated. What you lose in that, in many cases, are more advanced functionality. Think of a push notification like you may get from apps on your mobile phone right now. And take a scenario where a member may have a biometric screening coming up the next day. They've signed up for a fitness class. And because they have that mobile app that understands what they are and are not signed up for or accessing, it may send a push notification or ping that member to say, hey, just a reminder, your biometric screening or meeting with your physician tomorrow morning. Remember, you need to be fasting and don't eat beyond this time. Or, hey, that gym or yoga class is tomorrow morning. Make sure you bring your yoga mat and these other things. That idea of being able to really personalize and thoughtfully communicate to these members is vastly improved by mobile because you can optimize and really change what they're visually seeing, what's conveyed to them, and you have a much cleaner line of communication because these smartphones are right in our pockets.
Absolutely. We certainly see the demand for mobile technology in general, and we feel like on our side and our perspective and the employers we're talking to, that demand is only increasing. Another up-and-coming demand that you identified in your report was niche solutions. And these are things like financial wellness and stress management. I think it's fair to say that both markets are still very much in their infancy, especially for those pursuing financial wellness. I think it's relatively new, and a lot of companies out there do not really know exactly what to do with it. Where do you see these two sub-industries heading?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So this whole idea of niche solutions, and you call it a couple, be it financial wellness would be one that's, that high interest or growing demand, but not as much of a must-have transaction. I think part of that for financial wellness or even mindfulness and resilience and so forth, there's less market education or reference point for, have you ever purchased a financial wellness solution before? Many employers have not, so it's very interesting to them. But there's less conversions or purchasing transaction we're seeing in the space because of that lack of familiarity. That said, what there's a very, very strong interest in is, as we talked about before, this focus on total well-being and looking at the whole individual, is this desire to incorporate things beyond physical wellness and resources that will speak to the different members of the population. So whether that's a diabetes management program for folks where that's appropriate, whether that's a program focused around purpose for them personally and professionally, mindfulness and resilience.
Absolutely. So I want to deviate a little bit and go away from the report. We have you on the episode today, and you're a great resource. So I want to ask you about something that I hear from employers, brokers, health plans all the time. And it's whether employee wellness is a need to have or a nice to have. I personally am reminded of 401k plans. They started out as a nice to have. Now it is practically impossible to attract any talent without one. So they're effectively a need to have. Where do you think employee wellness is heading in this regard? 20 years from now, will every employer have some kind of program?
The answer is yes, absolutely. I think we're starting to see, and respondents in the report echoed this, that wellness and well-being programs are being perceived as a strategic imperative for organizations to have. It's a business decision that they're now making to attract and retain the best talent. I think what wellness is today and some of the program components we may be talking about will certainly change and evolve over time. But the reality is, if you're starting to implement solutions for a financial wellness program geared at student loan repayment because you want to attract the best and brightest millennial talents to your organization, yeah, in the grander scheme, by definition, that's part of a wellness or well-being program. But these employers are doing that to be perceived as an employer of choice and afford their employees and their members access to the resources that are personally relevant to them and not some big brother way to check on them and so forth.
Well, great. So I want to wrap up with a question about the report, which I hope will be happening in 2018. So assuming you have your report for next year, the third annual time you've ran the report, do you have a prediction? I'm going to hold you to this. What's your prediction for the 2018 report? What do you think we can expect from next year's assessment?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think my prediction will be focused around two key themes. One is, how do we improve access for our members? Access to the resources that are relevant to them. So we talked about mobile-first solutions. We talked about these hub platforms. You see the growth of telemedicine and on-site clinics. All of that's circulating around this idea of access. And smartphones in your pocket are a fantastic way to give a member access to the information and resources that are relevant to them. And I think that second theme is personalization. So those two kind of work hand in hand. Gone are the days where you send out a mass email or a paycheck stuff around high blood pressure, diabetes management, or something like that is applicable maybe to a subset of the population, but not to everyone you're mass communicating that to. So really, with mobile technology and these hub platforms and all of those other resources, thoughtfully communicating to a member based on their health status, their personal preferences, the plan they're enrolled in, who their dependents are, information that is relevant to them when it's time to go for an annual screening or a female participant to get a mammogram or something like that, providing them thoughtful information that says, okay, it's this time, it's medically appropriate for this. By the way, here are in-network providers of those services, and here's ways for you to make an appointment and shop those different pieces. That content, that messaging is personalized and thoughtful to that individual, so they have a high level of value associated with that, and it's deployed to them in a medium that is very accessible. And I think that when employers are looking for ways to, how do we improve participation and genuine engagement in our programming, taking a more thoughtful approach to the design of resources, what resources they are, and how you effectively communicate that to members is paramount for program success. So I think those key themes, access and personalization, are what you're going to see continue to grow in future years here.
Thanks, Tom. So that's all we have for today. I really want to thank you for your time and insight. I encourage everyone to go to Shortlister's website to download the full report. We only had a finite amount of time to talk to Tom today, and we only started really covering the just bits and pieces of what we thought were the most important highlights. There's still a ton of information that we didn't cover in the report, so I strongly encourage you to go out and download it. Like I said before at the beginning of this episode, please don't hesitate to reach out to us on social media. Our Twitter handle @GetWellable, and let us know what you think about the content in today's episode. This is Nick Patel, and you just listened to Wellable's podcast.